Today we're going to talk about Trump getting some bad news in court courtesy of the January 6th committee lawyers, and how the Republicans who supported Putin are backpedaling now that the whole world has turned against him. And I interview former Obama spokesman and host of Pod Save America and Pod Save the World, Tommy Vitor, about the Ukrainians' surprisingly strong showing against the Russians, the prospect of Russian citizens rising up against Putin at home, and his response to Tucker Carlson and Trump for parroting pro-Putin propaganda in the US. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen, and you're listening to No Lie. So I do want to dig into the war in Ukraine, but first, some big news out of the January 6th committee, and that is that as part of a civil court filing, the committee's lawyers revealed for the first time that they have evidence demonstrating that Trump and others could be charged with criminal violations, including obstructing an official proceeding of Congress and conspiracy to defraud the American people. And that filing included information from over 550 interviews with government officials. Now, one of those interviews was with Trump's senior campaign advisor, Jason Miller, who revealed that Trump had been told shortly after Election Day by a campaign data expert that he was going to lose to Biden, meaning that Trump knew his claims of a stolen election were complete BS. Like, in other words, he was made well aware of the facts beforehand and yet chose to lie for months on end because he was just trying to defraud the American people. Now, just so we're clear, the January 6th committee is legislative. It can't charge Trump, but it can make a criminal referral to the DOJ. Whether Merrick Garland will actually do anything with that remains to be seen. Like, I'll reserve my judgment on Garland because, you have half the people begging for patience and assuring us that he's working diligently behind the scenes, and then you have the other half saying that he's too feckless to do anything and he'll be the reason that Trump will ultimately claim he's completely and totally exonerated. So at this point, I don't know which one it is, so I'll just have some patience because I have no other choice but to have some patience. So look, just to set expectations here, we didn't get him, but it's at least evidence that the January 6th committee is taking this seriously and building a strong case. Now, whether everyone else down the line, meaning the DOJ and Merrick Garland, do their duties remains to be seen. But if you're looking for some accountability, as elusive as it's been, this is at least a step in the right direction. Okay. As for Russia and Ukraine, we're now a little over a week into Putin's invasion. This week's interview is with Tommy Vitor, and we'll talk about how things are looking over there, and he's definitely way more of an authority on this than I am. But I wanted to focus on how things are progressing at home, specifically with those Republicans who'd put themselves out there parroting pro-Putin talking points, only to watch their guy turn around to become the biggest villain in the world. Now, I'm sure by now you've heard people like Tucker Carlson and Trump's effusive praise of Vladimir Putin, with Trump calling him smart and savvy and genius, and Tucker pretending that Ukraine, a democracy, is the same as Russia, an autocracy. Well, turns out that putting their chips in the Putin is good basket 5 minutes before Putin launches a war against a sovereign country wasn't the best move. And so now comes the overcorrection. Now we've got Tucker and Trump both decrying the horrors of what Putin is doing. Here's the thing. They knew who Putin was. They knew he was a brutal autocrat. Everyone knows that he's a brutal autocrat. How many countries do you have to invade before you lose plausible deniability for being a tyrant? How many political opponents do you have to arrest and jail? How many people do you have to poison with polonium? But they knew, rightfully, that Putin was still obscure enough to Americans that the vast majority of people here wouldn't know or wouldn't care. Like, Putin flew just low enough below the radar that Tucker and Trump and other Republicans could run with their Putin apology tour and they can still get away with it. It was only when Putin exposed himself as exactly the man we all knew him to be by invading Europe's biggest country in the age of social media that the optics finally got so bad that these guys had to suddenly pretend that they had no idea this was coming and they had no choice but to change their minds about Putin. Like, give me a break. Nothing about Vladimir Putin changed. He's the same guy who he always was. The only thing that changed is that Americans realized that, and it became untenable for those Republicans to continue carrying water for the world's most hated tyrant. And that's what I hope people realize. The Trumps and Putins of the world are on the same team. If there's any distancing happening right now, it's not because they have any irreconcilable differences. It's not because their ideologies are divergent. It's because the optics were bad. That's all. I said this on last week's episode, and I'll say it again now. This is what far-right authoritarianism looks like. Whether it's in the form of a warmongering tyrant invading a sovereign country, or a malignant narcissist right here at home whose life's goal is convincing his own supporters to believe a lie for the purpose of undermining trust in a free and fair election, they are just two sides of the same coin. If you are rightfully scared about what's happening right now in Europe, then I hope you can recognize the same danger when it's right here on our own doorstep. To listen to my interview with former Obama administration spokesman and host of Pod Save America and Pod Save the World, Tommy Vitor, where we talk about the Ukrainians' surprisingly strong showing against the Russians, the prospect of Russian citizens rising up against Putin at home, and his response to Tucker Carlson and Trump for parroting pro-Putin propaganda in the US, click the thumbnail right here on this screen or check out the interviews playlist on my YouTube channel. And of course, if you haven't yet heard my interview with President Biden, you can also check that out on my YouTube channel as well.